Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this event, Driving the Energy Transition and Climate Resilience in EU Fisheries. This event's been organized by ClientEarth, the organization where I work. I should say my name is Adam Weiss, but also by our dear partners and longtime friends, Oceana and Seas at Risk. Your participation here today is crucial because we're tackling some of the most pressing issues facing our fisheries today. I wanted to set the context a little bit before introducing our panel members and getting started. We find ourselves at a critical juncture in the fisheries sector. Our ocean, which has sustained fishing communities for generations, is now under siege from climate change and biodiversity loss. The fishing industry, reliant on marine resources and fossil fuels, is particularly vulnerable to these changes, but it's also contributing to the challenges. All economic sectors have to transform in order for us to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. But the energy transition in fisheries isn't just about reducing emissions. It's also about securing a resilient and competitive future for the sector while ensuring the survival of fishing communities so they can thrive for generations to come. The European Commission pledged to develop a strategic roadmap by the end of 2024 for decarbonizing the fisheries sector. However, this roadmap is now expected to be delayed. At the same time, the ongoing negotiations on the Energy Taxation Directive are moving in the wrong direction in the Council. The Council presidency is proposing to extend the fossil fuel tax exemption for the maritime sector for another 20 years. That would further entrench high-emission fishing practices. So today we'll be exploring how the fisheries sector can not only adapt, but thrive in alignment with the EU's climate neutrality agenda. We've got a compelling lineup for you today. Speakers who will be sharing their insights on the sector's transition. I'm going to tell you a little bit about all of our speakers before handing over the microphone to them. Caroline Roose is a former member of the European Parliament and an active advocate for sustainable fisheries management. Sorry, I'm afraid I'm blocking you. She'll be kicking off our discussions with insights from her experiences on the fisheries committee. I'll introduce everyone if it's okay. Next we'll hear from Didier Gascuel, who is a fisheries ecology expert and professor at the Rennes Angers Agro Institute in France. And he's developed a new concept, indeed, a new word for our beautiful French language, pêche écologique, and he'll be telling us about that. And he'll be joined by Frédéric Ziegler from the Rise Research Institutes of Sweden. Frédéric publishes extensively on sustainable seafood. Together, that's why we put them on the sofa together, they will be providing scientific perspectives on the critical considerations for transitioning EU fisheries towards sustainability. And then lastly, we will welcome another long-term partner of ClientEarth and someone that we've enjoyed working with, Brian O'Reilly from the Low Impact Fishers of Europe, who brings nearly, an organization that brings nearly 50 years, I almost said you bring nearly 50 years, but I don't want to comment on their age, an organization that brings nearly 50 years of global fisheries experience and will reflect on the transition from the viewpoint of the many small-scale, low-impact fishers we want to see thrive in Europe's seas. There'll be a networking lunch after this, so I hope you'll be able to stay. I know some have to run off to other events. But I will now turn over to Caroline, who is going to speak in French, and my colleague Juliette is going to help. Juliette is brilliant and is not a trained interpreter, so those of us, Caroline is going to speak slowly, and we're really grateful for everyone's patience. So I'm going to give, yep.
Ça marche. Tout d'abord, merci à tous et à toutes d'être présents aujourd'hui et merci à ClientEarth pour l'organisation de cet événement. Moi, c'est la première fois que je reviens à Bruxelles depuis les élections, puisque, comme vous le savez, j'ai été 5 ans en commission pêche et 5 ans à défendre la pêche durable. Il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire pour défendre la pêche durable, parce que je pense qu'on n'a pas la même définition de la pêche durable avec certains, je dirais, collègues députés dans la commission pêche.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. Thank you for ClientEarth, Oceana and Seas at Risk for having organized this event. As you know, I am back in Brussels. I was a member of the PESH committee for 5 years during 2019 and 2024. And I think there's still a lot of work to do on the definition of sustainable fisheries, because I don't seem to have the same definition as my colleagues in the PESH committee.
Alors, des combats, ils ont été nombreux pendant 5 ans au sein de la commission pêche, et c'est vrai que je n'aurai pas suffisamment de temps de parole aujourd'hui pour développer tous les combats. Et donc je vais vous parler d'un rapport plus particulièrement aujourd'hui. Alors j'ai vu Iris en arrivant, je ne parlerai pas du MACO, Iris, aujourd'hui, mais je vais parler de l'article 17 de la politique commune de la pêche, ce fameux rapport de l'article 17 qui n'est absolument pas appliqué. Et puis puisque on parle de la feuille de route et de l'annonce de la Commission européenne pour cette feuille de route qui est attendue à fin 2024, je pense qu'elle va être accompagnée, et j'espère qu'elle sera accompagnée de critères ambitieux, de mesures claires, de mesures réalisables pour aller sur une transition de la pêche, parce que après je vais vous faire le parallèle sur ce qui s'est passé sur l'annonce du plan d'action.
The fights have been numerous over the last 5 years, and I won't have enough time to develop them all here today. I'm going to therefore speak more specifically about a report on Article 17, which is still widely unapplied. Sorry, just a second. We are waiting on the Commission to publish a roadmap for the energy transition for the fisheries transition and European fisheries at the end of 2024, and I'm hoping that this roadmap is going to be accompanied by clear and achievable measures to enable this fisheries transition, to enable better protection of marine environments. I will then draw a parallel with another roadmap that was published previously.
Parce qu'en fait, à la dernière législature, la Commission européenne nous avait fait une belle proposition de plan d'action. On a attendu longtemps et même très longtemps l'annonce de ce plan d'action. Et quand on nous a annoncé ce plan d'action, eh ben, on s'est retrouvé avec des mesures non contraignantes. Il y avait l'interdiction du chalutage de fond dans les aires marines protégées. C'était une belle annonce, mais absolument pas contraignante. Je pense que Didier en parlera tout à l'heure. Et en fait, j'aimerais pas qu'on se retrouve avec cette feuille de route sur exactement la même situation, et j'ai bien peur qu'on ait un petit peu sur les mêmes caractéristiques, et il va falloir mettre une grosse pression à la Commission européenne pour avoir cette feuille de route dans les temps.
The Commission during the last legislature published an action plan which has non-binding measures, for example, on the phase-out of bottom trawling in marine protected areas. And this is only a paper protection because, as you know, it's a non-binding obligation, and I fear that the same thing will happen on Article 17 of the CFP.
Alors justement, je vais vous parler de cet article 17, puisqu'il a fait l'objet d'un rapport d'initiative qui a eu du mal à passer au début. Donc c'est un article 17 de la politique commune de la pêche qui est malheureusement pas du tout appliqué. Aujourd'hui, on a des outils qui sont à disposition mais qui ne sont absolument pas appliqués. J'entends même parler qu'on va réouvrir la politique commune de la pêche. Avant de la réouvrir, je pense que celle qu'on a aujourd'hui, il faut déjà l'appliquer. Alors, se pencher un peu sur l'article, c'est aussi se poser la question sur qui a le droit de pêcher quoi dans l'Union européenne, en fin de compte. Et un petit rappel par rapport à cet article 17. En gros, le Conseil il est chargé de fixer chaque année les totaux admissibles de capture, donc les TAC. Les quotas ils sont répartis entre chaque État membre, et ensuite, c'est chaque État membre qui décide des règles selon lesquelles les quotas sont répartis entre les pêcheurs et les organisations de producteurs.
So Article 17 is widely unapplied. We today have the tools to make it applicable. Looking at, and we should do that before considering reopening the CFP. Looking at this article means asking another question: who has the right to fish what in the EU? As a reminder, the Council is tasked with fixing every year the total allowable captures. These quotas are then split up between the member states, and it is then up to these member states to decide under which rules these quotas are going to be split across the different fisheries and producer organizations. So it is therefore a competency of the member state to use Article 17.
Alors oui, c'est une compétence des États membres, mais la première obligation de cet article, c'est une obligation de transparence. Et moi, je dis bien obligation, parce qu'on a fait croire en commission pêche que l'article 17, on pouvait l'utiliser. Mais en fait, on doit l'utiliser parce qu'il y a un petit problème linguistique entre les transpositions des textes. Et c'est vraiment un doivent et non pas un peuvent. Et ça a été une grosse question pendant les négociations. Donc en fait, on doit mettre des mécanismes qui doivent être totalement transparents pour utiliser ces systèmes de distribution. Et on doit utiliser 3 critères sur cet article 17, des critères sociaux, économiques et environnementaux. Eh bien, souvent, j'ai des députés qui ont beaucoup parlé de social en disant « Non, mais d'abord, il faut voir le côté social des pêcheurs, mais ça existe, il est là et c'est prévu dans l'article 17. » Désolée, parce que du coup, je vois des finalement exactement, j'improvise peut-être. En français, du coup, c'est plus
The first obligation is one of transparency. It is necessary to put in place transparency mechanisms that will be accessible and comprehensible by everyone. And it is important from a democratic perspective to have access to equitable fishing resources. There is this question, I guess, that has been raised that you've faced on the English text, because there's a difference in the wording of using the word can versus should, and it is in fact a should. It is an obligation. There's the Article 17 calls on member states to use a number of criteria which are economic, environmental, and social, and the PECH members often mention these criteria, but actually they already exist, they are there.
Et puis aujourd'hui, on se retrouve avec... C'est bon. Et aujourd'hui, en fait, on a la majorité des systèmes de répartition qui, justement, se reposent sur les antériorités de pêche. Et en fait, du coup, on se retrouve avec une concentration économique dans le secteur de la pêche, et on a des obstacles qui rendent le secteur un peu moins attractif, surtout pour les jeunes pêcheurs, les jeunes entrants. Et qui en pâtit, en fait, c'est la petite pêche et la pêche artisanale qui se trouve totalement lésée sur les répartitions de quotas. Alors, je vais prendre un exemple sur le thon rouge parce que j'ai beaucoup travaillé sur cette espèce. Si je prends 2020, on a les petits pêcheurs qui ont reçu, je dirais, des miettes de quotas. 3% en Italie, 12% en Croatie et 12% en France et 14% en Portugal.
Today, the majority of a repartition system rests largely on historical criteria, and this reinforces the economic concentration of the fishing sector and creates obstacles to the sector and makes it unattractive for new young fishermen. Mostly these are small artisanal fishermen that are left behind. And I'm going to take the example of the bluefin tuna, which I worked a lot on this species. In 2020, small-scale fishers only received a small part of the quota for bluefin tuna, 3% in Italy, 12% in Croatia, 12% in France, and 14% in Portugal.
Et en France, on s'est retrouvé avec les petits pêcheurs qui ont attaqué en justice l'arrêté de répartition des quotas de thon rouge. Alors moi je trouve ça génial. J'ai été au tribunal administratif de Montpellier avec les pêcheurs qui ont gagné en première instance contre le gouvernement français. Il y a eu un appel du gouvernement français et ils ont encore gagné sur cet appel. Maintenant on attend de savoir ce que va faire le gouvernement français. Et suite à tout ça, moi j'ai eu un appel des pêcheurs artisans en Italie et ils attendent de savoir ce qui va se passer pour monter aussi au créneau et que ça fasse jurisprudence, et pour moi ce serait vraiment génial.
In France, the small-scale fishers brought a case on this allocation of quota of bluefin tuna. I was at the administrative tribunal in Montpellier in first instance, and the tribunal ruled in their favor. The government appealed, and that, the government appealed, but this shows that the current system is seen as unjust and creates real frustration and discontent with the fishermen. Once again, it is the fishers that won in the appeal, and as I understand it, fishers in Italy are waiting to see if this gets cascaded up and turns into jurisprudence at EU level.
Et pourtant, on a dans certains États membres des exemples de très bonnes pratiques, hein, puisque si je prends Malte, en Catalogne, d'abord en Espagne, on a un décret de gouvernance qui a établi des mesures volontaires pour un fonds de 10% des jours de mer alloués aux navires notés respectueux de l'environnement et de la société. À Malte, on a des critères environnementaux qui sont appliqués pour déterminer l'attribution des quotas de thon rouge, avec par exemple des pratiques de pêche comme la palangue ou la pêche à la ligne. Et Malte réserve une partie de son quota pour justement les imprévus, les captures accidentelles, même si j'aime pas ce mot accidentel. Mais on s'aperçoit qu'on a beaucoup d'autres exemples que je ne vais pas pouvoir tous citer, mais en fait c'est possible de faire en sorte que les quotas soient bien distribués à des pêcheurs dont les critères justement socio-économiques et environnementaux sont respectés. Et aujourd'hui, la manière dont les quotas sont répartis, pour moi, elle est cruciale, surtout pour arriver à faire perdurer la pêche artisanale et les ressources halieutiques.
There exists, however, interesting examples in member states where competent authorities have used this criteria, this social and environmental criteria. There is a community in Catalonia. In Spain, okay, Catalonia, thank you, with a decree.
And bycatch quotas for bluefin tuna.
Thank you. There are other examples that I will not cite here. Since the adoption of the last CFP reform, the Commission has done very little. The report notes that there has been no infringement procedures launched, and the way that the fishing quotas are allocated is crucial.
Je vais couper un peu parce que le temps tourne et je ne voudrais pas monopoliser, je dirais, le temps. Je me dis qu'en fait, si on ne respecte pas la politique commune de la pêche, si on ne respecte pas l'application de cet article 17 et bien d'autres choses sur la politique commune de la pêche, finalement on n'obtiendra absolument pas les objectifs d'une Green Deal, les objectifs de la directive 4 sur le milieu marin. Si on laisse la Commission européenne ne pas agir, parce que depuis la réforme, la Commission européenne n'a quasiment rien fait pour agir, il n'y a absolument pas de procédure d'infraction contre justement le fait de ne pas respecter la politique commune de la pêche. Et c'est pour ça qu'il faut continuer à mettre une pression sur la Commission européenne, continuer à être sur le terrain avec les ONG, travailler tous ensemble, aller voir les petits pêcheurs. Et en tout cas, moi je continuerai, même si je ne suis pas réélue, c'est pas grave, je continuerai à travailler avec vous tous. Merci.
Even though we haven't achieved, well, without respecting the CFP, we cannot hope to achieve the objectives of the Marine Strategic Framework Directive, the Green Deal, and the Biodiversity Strategy. And we can't achieve that without talking about quotas. Even though I no longer work, I had pre-translated some, which I'm sorry. Even though I no longer work in the Parliament, I will certainly keep up the fight on this question.
Thank you so much. I take that applause, Emily. Caroline's passion, but also for Juliette's excellent translation. And we're going to move on now to Didier and Frédéric. I will give you the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone. And thank you to the organizer for inviting me to this initiative. I will start my speech by presenting some of the results of a study carried out within my institute and that we published a few months ago. In this study we analyzed the ecological but also the social and economic performances of each of the French fishing fleet. In particular, we estimated the footprint in terms of fishing, in terms of juveniles catch, in terms of sensitive species, in terms of seafloor abrasion, and also in terms of CO2 emission of each fleet. And we estimated at the same time the employment, the value added, the benefits, the subsidies of each fleet. And then we have a very clear picture where we are at the moment, and it is a starting point to know where we want to go. Of course, in this discussion, I will insist on the result regarding CO2 emission because it is the topic of today. And clearly, that's not a surprise, I think, for you. The main part of the carbon footprint in France, but I think such a result is generally valuable for all the European fleets. The main part of the carbon footprint is coming from bottom trawling. We estimated that 63% of the French carbon footprint is coming from bottom trawling, while they are producing about 40% of the total catch. For every kilo of fish, the consumption of fuel is estimated between 1 and 2 liters. And I said often, if you have fish on your dish coming from trawling, you can add 2 glasses of fuel in top of you. It is what you are eating in the reality. That means that for every kilo of fish, bottom trawling are emitting around 3 to 5 kilo of equivalent CO2. At the same time, for the small-scale fisheries using passive gear, we estimated that the emissions are around 1 kilo of equivalent CO2 per fish, and for specific gear, it can be even less. Then, my first message, maybe my key message, is that there will be no decarbonization of the fishing sector in Europe without a progressive and organized phasing out of bottom trawling. The second point is how to go there. In fact, in the reality, we do not really have to push out bottom trawlers from the fishing system because the phasing out of bottom trawling is already on the way. In France, and I think it is the case in many countries, due to the decrease of probability, the bottom trawling is already decreasing. We estimated that the catch coming from bottom trawling has decreased by 40% over the last 15 years, and the number of trawlers is also decreasing, especially when there are some decommissioning plan. Almost all boats in this decommissioning plan are trawlers. Yes, one result is really that at the moment, those boats are really not profitable. We estimated that the gross value added, not the gross value added, the gross operating surplus, which is something completely different, which is but this is a raw measure of profitability, is lower than the subsidies that these fleets receive, especially in terms of exemption of tax on oils. That means that bottom trawling, and especially the offshore bottom trawling, the larger one, the industrial one in particular, are profitable only artificially due to subsidies, public subsidies that they receive. And at the same time, of course, this is not the case for small-scale fisheries, and specifically for small-scale fisheries using passive gear. They are the most profitable, and they are the ones, the fleets are creating the major part of the higher part of value added and also of job employment. Maybe you may think that, well, everything is fine, trawling is already decreasing, and these fleets are the ones that are the most impactful. They are also the ones that are the lower performances in terms of the impact on the environment, especially, of course, in terms of seafloor abrasion, but also in terms of overfishing, in terms of juveniles. I think that, in fact, that's not my point. I don't think that we just have to look at the decrease without doing nothing and thinking, oh, we are on the right way, trawling is decreasing. If we do nothing, I do not think that the small-scale fisheries will occupy the vacant place. Yes, of course, they will benefit from some, in some situations, especially if the small trawlers on the coastal zone disappear. Probably there will be some range for an increase of the small-scale fishery. If we apply Article 15, and I think it's really important, according more quota to the small-scale fishery, that can increase bid or increase, but yes, for the moment, small-scale fishery using passive gear represent less than 15% of the total catch. And they will not be able to go offshore on the continental shelf to fish the large stocks that are there and the large resources that are there. And if we do nothing, we risk to see the general decline of fisheries in Europe, and then an increase in importation, and for sure that will not be a good evolution for the environment. Then my second point is really to say that what we have to do is to invent, to accompany, to put some money probably, to invent a post-trawling future for fisheries, not only on the coast, but also offshore. And I really think that we need some boats of intermediate size, maybe between 12 and 45 meters, something like that, and boats that are able to fish with low impact. Low impact is not only for small scale, it is also for offshore fisheries, and that's really very important. It is a condition to have what I call in French pêche ecology. The English word is pesco-ecology, and more people and organizations are using them now. I think it's fine. That means that we need a new way of fishing to sustain all the sector and to not increase the importation and to have a profitable fishing system able to rush the two objectives of biodiversity conservation and at the same time to be able to contribute to the economy of the society and of the coastal territories. Thank you, and maybe sorry for my English, far from perfect.
Thank you so much for that, and particularly for the English for pêche écologie. I was thinking this morning I couldn't come up with it, so it's a beautiful word in English as well. And Federica, the floor is yours.
Support, yes, and yeah, I don't know if I can see you sitting here, but in the back in the audience. But thank you so much for having me here, inviting me to contribute my perspectives on this important topic. I was when I was thinking of how to tackle these 10 minutes, I thought about starting where we want to be in 2050 envisioning, because now we know enough about the why do we need to decarbonize. We know all the benefits there are. We know that fuel use is the largest contributor to both for the fisheries economy and contributes to the environmental impacts and greenhouse gas emissions. So reducing it will be beneficial on all sides. It also makes a fisher and the fishing sector very dependent on one raw material at a certain price, at a low price, and that is a vulnerability in itself for the food-producing sector, which is becoming more and more in focus. But where do we want to be in 2050? Well, we will have a thriving, profitable fishing sector that is carbon neutral, fishes sustainably, and provides livelihoods and produces food for EU citizens and beyond. So I'm also thinking we can produce what we need ourselves, but also export beyond that. And as you know, probably everyone, a lot of, or the main part of the seafood we consume in the EU is today imported. So that's quite a big change of mindset. And yeah, and whether these fisheries of the future in 2050 are large or small scale, I think is less important. As you also said in your last comment, the important thing is that they are low impact. And I think low impact fisheries can be both small and large scale. So we have seen that small scale fisheries can be very inefficient when they are done the wrong way. And even though, and regarding the bottom trawling, I was surprised. It's a very high number when you say 1 to 2 liters per kilo. It's a very, very inefficient bottom trawl fisheries. There are more efficient trawl fisheries than that, or mostly they are, but it's definitely one of the more energy-consuming fishing methods, for sure. What was I going to say? Yeah, luckily, low impact in terms of climate often goes hand in hand with biological aspects, so that is often a win-win situation, and including also the economic. So benefiting or going towards lower impact will be a positive development for several points of view. Yeah, I will keep it closer. And fishing vessels have also been optimized in 2050 to their operational profile, like how they are actually used, which is not the case today, and that is based on mapping their fuel use, what are they using the fuel for, and how can it be optimized to that specific operational profile. So that they have good control of what the energy is used for and how they can minimize it. Another side effect of reducing the use of fossil fuels is that many fishers actually think they spend their days in a smelly environment of diesel engines, and that is a very positive side effect in terms of work environment. Even though it's outdoors, I know it very well myself. Yeah, the fleet is using various fuels that they have that is available in ports, as is inshore electricity, and the fishing sector has made itself more independent of these complex supply chains of technology, energy, and biomass, and instead of importing, we export our both know-how and products. And including also that more citizens follow dietary guidelines for seafood and have increased the seafood consumption, which is another aspect of the future situation. But how did we then get there? How did we manage to get there? Because admittedly, it is quite far from the current situation. Yeah, we did at some point realize the importance of the importance and potential of the decarbonization process. That it has many co-benefits. It's not only the increasing the profitability, but also the few food security aspects. We need to produce more of our seafood in Europe, and yeah, all the positive side effects that come with that. And that was reflected in the setting of clear and mandatory binding goals for the phasing out of fossil fuels from fisheries. And fuel efficiency was also added as an explicit goal of fisheries management in the CFP to be followed up. And Article 17 also that was a tool to achieve this. It was starting to be implemented more widely and to reward fuel efficient and low impact fishers with more fishing opportunities and phasing out the ones that were not. And that clarity in goal that created incentives to implement new technologies and also new fuels. It was easy to obtain funding for this kind of measures to measure and map the fuel use and operational profile to make it possible for vessels to be optimized according to their use. And the MFAF was used to co-fund this type of measures, leading to energy efficiency of fishing vessels, but also to training for new types of operation of fishing vessels. And in close collaboration with the shipping sector, new fuels became available in ports because the shipping sector is ahead on this development. And only those fuels were exempt from taxes, only the alternative fuels. That was an important way of reaching these goals. And that is to even out the price difference. There is a price difference, obviously, marine diesel. Yeah, some people were saying that capacity ceilings were limiting this development and that it could not be, it was impossible to do the decarbonization. It was stopping us. But actually today ClientEarth is launching a report that my colleague Sarah Homborg has mainly been working with together with me, and she has looked into this aspect, and we found that for many countries there is capacity left and there is room to expand and also to shift capacity between different fishing segments. And there are 5 case studies and they're looking into different scenarios for energy efficiency and also looking at energy efficiency measures together with hybrid solutions implemented in the fleet. And the conclusion is to make it very short that the capacity ceilings are not stopping this development. Instead, the decarbonization is a process that will contribute to fulfilling the goals of the ceilings, which is having fisheries more in balance and reducing fishing, overfishing and overcapacity in fishing opportunities. So yeah, that's basically how we move from today to 2050, and that is actually a very exciting development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that compelling vision of the future for today. Yeah, and you'll now see a QR code that you can scan. It's not impolite to get your phone out now, if you want to hold it up and see what we've got there. We've got a report that you can see that you can continue looking at afterwards, but please that you should share around. But I'm going to hand over the floor now to Brian.
Monsieur Didier. We have a technical problem. Lots of technicians sorting it out. Well, thanks very much for the invite and good afternoon. Can you hear me? It's always good to go last because you can bask in the shade and ride on the shirt tails of all the brilliant things that have already been said, so people kind of maybe switch off a bit. So thanks very much for these brilliant interventions. But the first question I'd like to ask is, what's all the fuss about? You know, why are we so concerned about decarbonisation in the fishing sector? It's only 0.1 to 0.05 of global greenhouse gas emissions on a global level, and the EU fishing sector only produces 3% of what is produced globally by fishing at sea. So the problem is, what is being loosely talked about here and what Adam referred to, first of all, is this resilient and competitive future. At the moment, the fishing sector is totally dependent on fossil fuels. It's an Achilles heel. And the fuel tax directive that you referred to is a clear indicator that if you have to pay the market price for fuel with tax, then fishing can't function. So there has to be a transition, because certainly for the sector I work in, the small scale sector, fuel prices are just too high, even as they are, to be profitable. So somehow we have to make the transition towards profitable fisheries. The other side of the coin is that fishing in Europe is not competitive compared to fishing in other parts of the world. 70% of what we consume in Europe is imported, and 40% of what we consume is from questionably sustainable sources, and the imported products that we consume comes from sources which don't have to comply with the same social and environmental standards that European products do. So how can European fisheries be competitive in such an environment when the imports and the unsustainable kinds of products like white fillet, farm salmon, and prawns from Southeast Asia are some of the most unsustainably produced products on the market, and yet our European consumers are demanding. So one critical issue is, as well as an energy policy, which the energy policy is way ahead of us. Targets have been set for 2050 for offshore wind generation. We're nowhere in fisheries. There is no plan for fisheries in the future. Where is fishing going to take place? What is seafood in the future going to look like? Are we going to eat surimi? Are we going to eat single-cell protein? Are we going to eat imported stuff? Carnivorous salmon? What are we going to eat? There is no plan, there is no vision. It's all market generated demand. So pêche écologique is a solution. The way we describe it in life is fair fisheries. Fair for the fishermen, fair for future generations of fishermen who want to come in and fish, and fair for people and the planet. It needs to tick all of those boxes to be pêche écologique, to be fair. So our vision of the future, we've talked a lot about the transition to low impact fishing, and it's good to see that some flesh is being put on the bones as to what that actually means in terms of what we need to aspire to and how we need to think about how we get there. And a critical aspect of that is what in life we call differentiated approach. We need a differentiated approach to the way small-scale, inshore, day fishing, landing fish of the very high quality that Didier referred to. There's a huge amount of value added in this fish. This is the fish that the top restaurants are demanding, fish of the day. It's what consumers eat. It's a huge variety, but it's only 5% of what we actually catch now. And Article 17 could be used, it would be a huge amount to begin with. I mean, even if small-scale fishers was able to double their catches to 10%, it would still only be 5% of the quota being reassigned to small-scale inshore sustainable fisheries. So that's first and foremost, we have to define what that means. I've got some notes on that. So, differentiated approach, implementation of Article 17 to create a situation where quota is given to those who fish in the most sustainable manner, who produce the highest value, rather than those who fish the most, the track record that Caroline referred to. We need to get rid of the harmful subsidies that are currently plaguing the fishing sector, building bigger boats with greater capacity. We need to use public money for public good. It may sound like a slogan, but it's a good yardstick to say, how many people is this money really developing, really helping? At the moment, something like only 3% of the fisheries fund goes to what's called CLLD, community-led local development, and that's allocated through the flags. And although it's not an ideal way of getting money to the fishing sector, it seems to be a system which has achieved a lot of good, a lot of very positive results. We also need to subsidise small-scale sustainable fishing organisations to have their own producer organisations. Currently, most of the quota is allocated through producer organisations, which are recognised farming and fishing organisations, which tend to benefit larger scales of production and larger scales of economy. When we talk about small-scale fishing companies, we're talking of nano-enterprises, enterprises with perhaps tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands maximum turnover of business, rather than millions of tons, or tens of thousands of euro and hundreds of thousands of euro turnover. We need to be able to support them and channel subsidies for them to also to be able to develop their production and marketing plans, so that the value that they add to the fish they sell can be put on the market in a way which is competitive, in the sense that it's quality fish. It's not having to compete with the massive fish we import or the massive fish that is being caught by trawlers. And within our differentiated approach, within the 12-mile limit, because I would like to see the 12-mile limit dedicated to inshore sustainable fishing, within the 12-mile limit we need to establish co-management as an invaluable source, as an invaluable inshore tool for fisheries management. And co-management is the exception rather than the rule. It's been pioneered in a few places. I met with some colleagues from Portugal, and I see them here today. They were talking about a very successful project in the south of Portugal in the octopus fishery, which has really achieved fantastic results. In Catalonia, co-management is now the law, and in the coast of Galicia we also have the Los Menasos project, which has really pioneered what co-management can be and the kind of results it can achieve. And last but not least, we get back to what I would call local, fair and sustainable food systems. The food system shouldn't be just about bulk and looking at per capita consumption. When we look at per capita consumption, in fact, we see that Europeans probably eat too much fish, 24 kilos per year, which, although compared to meat may be small, 70 kilos a year, it's still quite a lot. We need to see how we can eat better quality fish, but perhaps less of it. And that comes back to how aquaculture is going to develop in the future. At the moment, our aquaculture model is either shellfish production, and there's a lot to be said for shellfish as a way of cleaning the environment and providing a sustainable food source. But at the other level, we have carnivorous aquaculture based on fishing. So I think we really have to prioritize our fisheries for human consumption, not for fishing or consumption, as a basic principle. And secondly, when we look at aquaculture, we have to look at multi-trophic aquaculture. We have to look at the whole ecosystem. We need to look at all the levels in the marine environment, from the bottom to the top, producing algae, kelp. There are so many good foods that we can have from primary production. And then we have to respect the food chain going up to the top, because if at the top of the food chain you've overfished, that's going to affect the way that food can be recycled back. And we haven't talked about blue carbon, or carbon sequestration, or carbon storage in the marine environment and the impact that fishing can have on that. But that is also a very important area. And last but not least, Didier's area, which is the use of science, maximum sustainable yield, and the way that at the moment scientific advice is misused for mismanaging fisheries under what we call maximum sustainable yield, which is nothing of the kind, when our biological reference points are so totally misused and used in a kind of sloganeering way. Everything's fine in the fishery because we are approaching maximum sustainable yield for 70% of our fish stocks. But what does that mean in practice? That we are fishing at levels which allow 30% of the biomass of those fish stocks to sustain themselves, which means that we're in a vicious cycle when it comes to fishing. Because the fish stocks are at a suboptimal level, we have to fish harder to catch more, to make our vessels profitable, which means burning more fossil fuels, which means impacting more on the seabed. So until we can get above maximum sustainable yield, with fish stocks at levels perhaps 2 or 3 times the stock necessary to replenish our fishing resources, then it's going to be a vicious cycle. And yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm not on message, but we have a manifesto for the next legislature, which is all about fair policies for fair fisheries and the fisheries of the future, the resilient, competitive, and fair fisheries we all aspire to. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Brian. And before we finish, I just wanted to give us a moment to reflect on what we've heard today. We've heard a beautiful vision for the future of fisheries in Europe. We've heard a vision of local, sustainable, and fair fisheries in which high-value fish is adding value to the European economy, in which we're not importing environmentally destructive fish from elsewhere in the world, but producing and exporting not only fish, but a fisheries model that's compatible with our planetary boundaries and good health. We've also heard the obstacles to getting there. We've heard that we have a should obligation in Article 17 of the Common Fisheries Policy, and yet shockingly low figures for the actual numbers of, for the actual quotas that are distributed to the kind of fishers that we all think of emotionally when we imagine fisheries in Europe. We have an image that Didier gave that will not leave my mind quickly of ordering that piece of fish that comes with an extra 2 glasses of fuel above the leader that's already there. And those obstacles are very, very serious. Our fisheries are confronted in Europe with a trifecta of challenges. There's the urgent need for environmental sustainability amid climate change, the pressures of social equity as measures struggle to survive while others who shouldn't be are thriving, and there's the imperative for economic competitiveness in a global market. Today we've heard from scientists, from a former member of the European Parliament, and a representative of small-scale, low-impact fishers. Their insights underscore the critical need for immediate action. The European Commission must deliver its promised roadmap for the energy transition in fisheries, and must deliver it by the end of this year. This roadmap is not just a bureaucratic requirement, it is a lifeline for our fisheries and the communities who depend on them. Delays in releasing the roadmap threaten our ambitions for climate neutrality by 2050 and the long-term resilience of our fisheries sector. We cannot afford to wait any longer. The roadmap must provide clear, actionable steps for transitioning to sustainable fishing practices while ensuring a fair and just transition for all fishers. We have heard today that the most destructive fishing methods receive disproportionate support through fuel subsidies and fishing access that enable them to remain profitable. A competitive and sustainable fishing industry is crucial for the future of our fisheries. This transition cannot occur while harmful fuel subsidies and fishing opportunities support destructive practices. Instead, we need to ensure that funding and access to fishing resources are directed towards transforming the sector into one that is resilient and low impact. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you can stick around for a little while because we've got some lunch for you and some really interesting conversations. I think the idea was that we would ask each other questions during the lunchtime, so please keep them and feel free to...
I would like to ask a question to everybody, because what I see is that we talk to the converted among ourselves a lot, we learn a lot, but we don't have the reach that is necessary to the general population to convey enough courage to the politicians that they stop listening to the lobbyists. What we see is that they are so powerful and they make so much pressure that in the end, you get these sort of hesitations and nothing to act now. While I'm not a great fan of going to the courts, because normally it should only be the last resort, but I do ask myself, if we have systematic non-application of the law and breach of the law in the member states and at the European level, can we not take the governments to court and trigger a broader public debate, not in the circles of people who are anyway, and fisheries is such a small sector. How is it possible that they sort of, do whatever they please, and there is no sanction, no outcry, no nothing? So I think that is the challenge we want. If we want to change and not only reassure ourselves how wonderful we are, I think this is what we need to tackle.
I think it's beautiful what you said. The only disagreement is you said that you would go to court. You don't enjoy going to court. At ClientEarth, we love going to court. We've had quite a few fisheries cases already, actually, including action that we took in cooperation with the low-impact fishers of Europe, and a case that, if you want to have a chat with my colleague Alex, who's sitting right here, who was just in court last week against the Council of the EU, so all 27 member states together. We are indeed in court, and what you say is entirely right, that we need to be using legal tools, of course, with other tools as well, because you're right, the entire European public hasn't joined us here today. We're a small group, but we've got to make a big impact. With that, please a round of applause for our panelists. And let's keep the conversation going. Thanks, everybody.